The first time Coach Avery Lang saw the Bobcat, he thought someone was messing with him. It was 5:42 a.m., the hour when Ridgecrest Middle School still smelled like yesterday's floor cleaner, and the world outside was mostly dark. Avery always came early, partly because he liked the quiet, partly because he needed the gym open before the first wave of kids arrived for morning conditioning. He'd been a coach for 12 years and a teacher for 7 before that. He could measure a day by the sound of a bouncing basketball and the squeak of sneakers, and he trusted routine the way other people trusted luck. So when he pulled into the staff lot and saw a shape pacing by the gym entrance under the sodium lamp, his brain reached for a normal explanation. Stray dog, raccoon, some kid from the neighborhood sneaking in. Then the shape stepped into the light and Avery's stomach tightened. A bobcat. It was medium-sized but built like a coiled spring. Tawny fur spotted dark, short tail flicking sharply, ears tufted in black. It moved in tight circles around the gym doors, stopping every few steps to sniff the bottom seam and paw at the metal frame. Each time it completed a loop, it threw its head up and released a rough, broken yowl that echoed off the brick wall. Avery froze with his keyring in his hand. Wildlife had wandered onto school grounds before. Deer on the practice field, a coyote near the dumpsters. But those animals fled as soon as they saw a person. This one didn't. It kept circling the door like the door had done something to it. Avery's first instinct was to back away and call animal control. But as he stood there, something else rose through the adrenaline. The bobcat wasn't acting like an animal hunting or cornered. It wasn't scanning the lot for escape routes. It wasn't fixated on Avery as a threat. It was fixated on the gym. Avery cleared his throat softly. "Hey," he called, not stepping closer. "Go on. Shoo." The bobcat stopped mid-circle and turned its head slowly toward him. Its eyes caught the light, pale gold, steady. Avery felt that unpleasant jolt of being looked at by something that didn't care about human rules. Then the bobcat turned back to the gym doors and resumed its pacing. Avery swallowed. His keys jingled when he shifted his grip, and the sound echoed in the empty lot. The bobcat flinched at the jingle, then yowled again, louder, as if angry at the delay. "Okay," Avery muttered, heart thumping. "Okay, I'm not your problem, am I?" He approached the doors cautiously, keeping his body angled and his steps slow. The bobcat moved to the side but didn't retreat. It continued to circle, now tighter, almost brushing the wall as if tracing an invisible boundary. Avery unlocked the first door and stepped into the gym vestibule. The warmth and stale rubber smell hit him, familiar and oddly comforting. He expected the bobcat to run when he disappeared inside. Instead, through the glass, it stayed. It paced in the same loop, never leaving the door. Avery hesitated, then stepped back out, keeping the door cracked behind him. "All right," he said softly. "What do you want?" The bobcat stopped and stared at him. Then it did something that made Avery's skin prickle. It walked straight to the locker room hallway exit door, an exterior door on the side of the gym building used for after-hours events, and pressed its nose to the bottom seam. Then it pawed at the concrete there and yowled, short and urgent. Avery's eyes narrowed. That door led into the boys' locker room corridor, the one that ran behind the main gym and connected to the storage closet and equipment cage. It was old construction, thick cinder block walls, utility chases, lockers bolted in long rows along one side. Avery took a few steps toward that side door. The bobcat backed away just enough to give him space, then resumed circling around it instead of the main entrance, as if it had successfully redirected him. That was when Avery noticed something he hadn't noticed at first. The bobcat's paws were damp, not muddy, wet, like it had been walking through water recently, and the fur around its lower legs was slightly darker, clumped in places. Avery's stomach tightened. There wasn't any water source near the gym except the drains behind the locker rooms and a narrow runoff channel that ran along the foundation after rain. But it hadn't rained. He tried the side door. It was locked from the inside. Of course, school security. The bobcat yowled again and raked the door seam with its claws. Scratch, scratch. Then paused, ears forward, listening. Avery listened too. At first there was only the hum of the building's HVAC system. Then faintly he heard something else. A dull, rhythmic knocking sound coming from inside the wall. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud. It was muffled, like someone tapping from behind concrete. Avery's pulse spiked. He stepped closer, pressed his ear near the door. Tap, tap, tap. His mouth went dry. That wasn't the building settling. That was intentional. He backed up, pulled out his phone, and called the school's security line. No answer. Too early. He called the principal. Straight to voicemail. The tapping continued. Avery's throat tightened. If someone was inside the locker room at this hour, trapped behind something, it could be a kid who snuck in, a custodian, a vandal. It could also be worse. He called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Coach Avery Lang at Ridgecrest Middle School, he said fast, voice tight. There's a wild bobcat outside the gym door, and I'm hearing knocking from inside the locker room wall. I think someone might be trapped. A pause, then the dispatcher's voice sharpened. Sir, stay outside. Do not approach the animal. Officers are on the way. Avery stared at the bobcat, still circling the door like a restless clock hand. It's not attacking, he said, voice shaking. It's like it's trying to get my attention. Units are en route, the dispatcher repeated. Can you confirm you hear knocking? Avery swallowed. Yes, it's coming from inside the wall behind the lockers. Do not enter, the dispatcher warned. Stay on the line. Avery kept his eyes on the door and forced himself to breathe. The tapping slowed, then returned in a frantic burst. The bobcat's ears snapped forward. It yowled again, sharp and urgent, then pressed its face to the seam at the bottom of the door, as if trying to smell the sound. Avery made a decision. He couldn't open the door, but he could get inside through the main gym entrance, run down the hallway, and access the locker room from inside. He didn't tell the dispatcher he was moving. He just said, I'm still here. And then he jogged inside through the gym vestibule, leaving the bobcat outside. The gym interior was dim, lit only by emergency lights. Avery ran across the polished floor, shoes squeaking, and pushed through the double doors into the hallway that led to the locker rooms. The building felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. He reached the boys' locker room door, unlocked for staff access, and shoved it open. The smell of sweat and disinfectant hit him, familiar and unpleasant. Rows of blue lockers lined the walls. Benches sat empty. A few forgotten towels lay in a heap like dropped flags. Avery stood still and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It was louder here, unmistakable. It was coming from the far wall, behind the last row of lockers near the equipment cage. Avery's skin prickled. Hello, he called, voice echoing off tile. Who's there? A weak voice answered, muffled by wall and metal. Help! Please! Avery's stomach dropped. He ran toward the sound. The lockers were bolted to the wall, but behind them was a narrow maintenance chase where pipes and conduit ran. The school had old plumbing lines that sometimes leaked. That chase had an access panel at the end, usually locked, used by maintenance. Avery reached the panel area and saw it, a small metal hatch near the floor, partly hidden behind the last locker bank. The edges were scratched, and fresh moisture glistened on the tile below it. Water. Avery crouched and shone his phone flashlight at the base. A thin stream of water was seeping out, running along the grout line. Tap, 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 now faster. Avery pressed his ear near the hatch. The voice came again, clearer. I'm stuck. I can't breathe good. Avery's heart slammed. Hold on, he said, voice shaking but firm. I'm here. I'm getting you out. He grabbed the nearest bench and dragged it with a screeching sound, positioning it so he could reach the top screws of the hatch. He fumbled with his keys, realized none of them fit, and then remembered the emergency toolkit mounted in the gym office. He sprinted back out, grabbed the red wall box key, and yanked the toolkit open. A screwdriver, a small pry bar. Not much, but enough. When he returned, the tapping had become weaker, slower, like whoever was inside was running out of strength. Avery forced himself to move faster without getting sloppy. He crouched at the hatch, twisted screws out with shaking hands, and pried the panel free. A blast of damp, warm air rolled out, stale, humid, smelling like rust and wet concrete. Behind the hatch was a narrow crawl space, dark and cramped, and inside it, wedged awkwardly against a pipe in a conduit bundle, was a student. A boy. His face was pale, eyes wide, hair plastered to his forehead. He was lying partly on his side, one arm bent at an angle. His other hand, the one that had been tapping, trembled with exhaustion. Water pooled around his legs, shallow but rising. "Coach," he whispered, voice cracking with relief. I I couldn't get out." Avery's throat tightened hard. "Stay still," he said. "I've got you." The space was too tight for Avery to crawl fully inside without getting stuck too, but he could reach the boy's shoulders. He slid his arms in carefully, braced his feet on the tile, and pulled slowly. The boy winced, crying out softly. "What's your name?" Avery demanded, to keep him talking, to keep him conscious. Jonah," the boy whispered. I dropped my phone. Behind. I crawled. The panel shut." Avery's mind flashed to the horrible simplicity of it. A kid reaching for something, crawling into a maintenance chase, the hatch falling shut behind him, the waterline leaking steadily, turning the crawl space into a rising trap. Avery pulled again, inch by inch, until Jonah's shoulders cleared the opening. Then he grabbed Jonah under the arms and dragged him out onto the locker room tile. Jonah collapsed, coughing, shaking, water dripping from his clothes. Avery rolled him onto his side the way he'd been trained for choking hazards and shock. "You're out," Avery breathed, voice breaking. "You're out." Jonah clung to Avery's sleeve like it was the only solid thing in the world. I thought no one would hear." Avery swallowed, eyes stinging. "Someone did," he said automatically. He didn't even realize what he meant until a moment later, when he heard sirens outside and remembered the Bobcat. Police arrived first, then paramedics. They assessed Jonah quickly. Mild hypothermia, bruises, dehydration, panic, but alive. They wrapped him in warming blankets and asked Avery questions, while Jonah's breathing steadied. Outside, through the locker room window, Avery saw a flicker of movement near the gym side door. The Bobcat. It was still there, sitting near the foundation as if it had never left its post. When the paramedics led Jonah out on a stretcher, Jonah's eyes drifted toward the window, and he frowned weakly. "What is that?" he whispered. Avery followed his gaze. "A bobcat," he said softly. Jonah's eyes widened. "It was screaming. I heard it. I thought I was hallucinating." Avery's throat tightened again. "Yeah," he said. "It was screaming." As the ambulance doors shut and the urgency shifted into aftershock, the bobcat finally stood. It trotted along the fence line, paused once to look back toward the gym doors, toward the place it had circled and clawed and yowled until humans stopped treating the morning like routine. Then it vanished into the trees behind the athletic field, silent as a shadow. Later, when the sun was fully up and the principal arrived in a panic and the maintenance crew shut off the leaking line, Avery stood alone in the locker room, staring at the open hatch. The crawl space looked smaller now, less dramatic, just damp concrete and pipes. But he couldn't stop imagining Jonah in there, tapping weakly while water rose, while the building above slept. He wrote the incident report. He explained how Jonah had gotten trapped, how the leak had started, how the hatch had jammed. He listed changes: lock the access panel, add sensors, inspect pipes, install a louder alarm. Nowhere in the report did he write the part that made his hands shake. Nowhere did he write, "Wild Bobcat alerted staff by circling gym door and vocalizing until rescue was initiated," because it sounded impossible. But as Avery left the building that day, he walked past the gym side door and looked down at the concrete. There were small paw prints in a dusty patch near the foundation, round impressions that circled the entrance again and again, like a drawn boundary. The bobcat hadn't just passed through. It had stayed. It had insisted. It had refused to leave until someone listened to the knocking behind the locker wall. Avery stared at the prints for a long moment, then looked out toward the trees. He didn't see the bobcat again. But every time he unlocked the gym before dawn after that, he listened more carefully. To the pipes, to the walls, to the quiet. Because once you've learned that danger can hide behind a panel in the most familiar room in a school, you stop assuming that silence means safety, and you never forget the morning a wildcat became the alarm bell.